property.
Oh, that's love.
Yep.
Just for the recording's purposes, Chris's wife brought him ice cream, and I was like, "That's love, right, guys?" So let's face it.
Except it's going to melt if I don't eat it. So I'm torn between having started a show and having ice cream. It's going to melt in front of me, but
you're not torn. Okay. There's one clear choice: eat the ice cream.
Yeah, you just do one of those.
I consider myself pro at ice cream, like world class. Like I'm really good at ice cream, like really good. Oh, so good. So I take my ice cream seriously. It's a big part of my days.
That's a passion.
So hey, welcome everybody. Here's our Chris and I were talking about third podcast here. So we're starting to get some content built up that people can check out. We do this every Thursday, typically 4 p.m. Eastern time. Might be a good opportunity. What are we thinking next week, Chris? Chris has a commitment. You want to go
next
later?
week? I have to be later if we do it. Yeah, I gotta. Yeah.
So what do you think? Can we come up with that now?
6 p.m. would work for me. I'll be back.
6 works. 6 works.
Camp counselor, so I need to make sure I'm back.
Well, so if you're listening now or checking this out later, next Thursday, which will be the 8th of July, we'll be doing 6 p.m. Eastern for the live version of this, of course. And that's just, we invite the community to come and just hang out and be a part of things. And we do have a couple opportunities for discussion where we like to hear from you guys. So it's great to have some folks here live with us. And thank you for that. We've had pretty good support so far. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this week, announcements. We talked about always doing that. I was wondering, we probably work on writing some of those down a little more, but I'd say from my side, it's definitely worth just noting again, the trial election 2 is Saturday, July 17th, right? Is that 2100? No, that's
UTC. 1600 UTC, I think. Or was it 1700?
17.
Is it 1 or 2 p.m. for us?
Here we are.
It was noon or 1 p.m. I think. That's what it was.
I'm gonna check the pinned message in our chat.
Yeah, I thought it was noon.
It is right here. What did we say? 17th at 1700 UTC. That's how we remember it, Chris. 17 and 17, right?
That makes it easy.
So July 17th. So basically 2 weeks from this Saturday.
Yep.
At 1700 UTC. Convert that yourself, people. Sorry, can't do better. It's 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to do our second trial election. We've got 2,500 plus EOS budgeted. I actually have a potential surprise addition to the budget that I'm saving. I'm going to make an announcement. It's a little tantalizing as we get closer. But really a decent amount of funding available. And we were on a call this morning, a kind of an Eden open kind of round table, right? With Jimmy from Uplift. And who else? Who was the other gentleman? He was
Corey.
So Jimmy and Corey from Uplift, and a really good time. But we were talking about, what the elections are like. And I think we're so alienated in the voting that we've been a part of in our lives to this point, that unless you're really a major influencer, or you don't feel like you have any clout or that your vote really matters that much, it couldn't be farther from the truth in Eden. Yeah, I mean, it's so powerful to participation, right? And how you not only your ultimate vote, but you get to influence the dialogue, the conversation, bring collaborative ideas to the table. Even if you have no intention of running, you don't want the responsibility, you don't have the time, whatever. 50 minutes. If you're not running, it's we're really talking. Let's say an hour. Once you're in the room a little early, that tends to help. An hour of your time. And I promise you've never experienced anything like it. Chris.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, you got to do the whole ride, and just to that, and I'll turn it over to you. I'm still amazed at 64, for the most part, strangers, randomly put into groups, 16 to start, reached consensus in 4.5 hours.
Yep.
I mean, some people can't settle an argument with their friend in 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
4.5 hours. And I mean, we're happy. I've yet to hear a complaint. I've yet to hear one person go, that Chris, you salty son of a bitch. How did he get in there?
Yeah. I mean, we're not, the thing with consensus, well, first, okay, to go back, I think voting is just the wrong word. We need to think of another word, because when we talk about this and we use the word vote, it immediately elicits a response in people.
Yeah.
And they're thinking of how they typically would vote in a democracy. And it doesn't work. It doesn't apply here. But yeah, and I think even still, like, you're going to have I've heard a lot of people talk about this idea of it being a popularity contest, and the most popular are going to win. And you're not going to not everybody's going to like you. Like, for sure, not everybody in the EOS community is going to like me. I'm going to piss somebody off and be in like, that's totally okay. But that's not the goal. The goal is just first of all, it shouldn't be about the people. It should be about what the people represent. Right. And it goes back to that first election, and the issue with the extra 1,000 EOS that came up from Eves when he put forward. Right. Sure. And the question in the final round was he promoting the person or what the person stood for? And that fundamentally is a question that is what Eden can solve for. Right. I mean, you want to trust the person to be able to then action what they stood for. So you're voting, or you're selecting for the project, however they're going to spend the funds, and enriches and increases the EOS ecosystem. That's what you're kind of picking, and then the person you're trusting to actually deliver. So it's kind of like two pieces, right?
Yeah. And you were a nobody, right? We've said this before. Like, who are you? You might disappear after your term. I mean, maybe he doesn't get elected. There could not be a Chris Barnes July 17th. Gone.
I was totally.
But seriously,
I didn't
you didn't have some big rep. Nope. I didn't know who you were, frankly. I'd seen you around, seen you active, but I don't even think we had been on a call or anything prior to that.
No,
maybe. But you made it happen because you not only had some clarity about what you wanted to do with the funds, should you have the opportunity to get elected, but you collaborated, right? And you evolved as you went through the round somewhat too, right? Didn't you? I mean,
it's
didn't deviate from the main thing, but you kept pulling in ideas, and
it's intention. Like, I just wanted to see it do well. Like, I was, again, gravitated to the idea of what Eden is and what it could turn into and evolve into. And so the EOS as a testing ground for this is perfect. Like, it fits so perfectly. So my intention was just to do good for this process, and like, whether I won or not, it turned into a game halfway through, and I was kind of gaming it. Okay, how do I win? How do I? But stepping back, it's like in the end, you want to just whoever ends up in the final round, they're just hopefully are people who are honest and want what's best for the community, and they'll do things that are good. I mean, maybe they'll make decisions that aren't ideal, but as long as that underlying root intention is good, and this process at least solves for that, it's a good process. I mean, that EOS needs this, and EOS needs the funding. We need to just find a way to, unlock some of this. If it's inflation, then let's get it unlocked. If it's a donation from Block 1, then let's make that happen. Let's get the first official election. Let's get the real money. Like, we need these trial elections to prove out the process a little more, so we can get to where it's really going to matter, where guys like Aaron from Greymass can get some funding, so they can, roll out some of the probably far bigger projects that they might have on the go. And that's what we need. We need things to happen, and Eden is the way by which we can make things happen.
I think you're speaking to something very important, though, at least from my perspective. Proving it out, demonstrating the value. There can be frustration with the pace. I know that we hoped things were going to move a little faster than they have to this point, but I'm actually quite grateful that they've progressed the way they have. I'm grateful that, Dan didn't get the okay from B1 or the BPs, 2 months ago. I really think, honestly, we would have flipped it. I do. I don't think we were ready to get, $50,000 in the round one, elected representatives' hands, and $250,000 in the next round, and, a half, 2, 3, 4 million into the Satoshi, even if it was Dan, because part of what's happening is this process of discovery, right?
Mhm.
To me, I'm learning so much from so many people about the issues, about the challenges that EOS mainnet faces, what everybody feels needs work. And we were just talking earlier before we turned on the recording that let's see if we can get Aaron on here to give more of that perspective, because I think people need to hear that. I come from the business hat side of this. And if I learned anything when it comes to funding of any kind and asking for funding, which is effectively what you're doing running as a rep, you're kind of fundraising for whatever it is that you want to work with. You do need to know what you want to do with the money. Vague is not going to work. It's just, and it shouldn't.
Right.
I'm
Shouldn't
not going to
work.
vote
Yeah.
for you when you just say, well, I really want to help bring new people to EOS. How?
Right.
Great, we all want that, but I'm not going to put you in a position to be in charge of a budget that frankly you don't know what you're going to do with. And we need an ROI, flat out return on investment. At this point, we are not going to get taken seriously by the block producer community, the general EOS, the greater EOS community, and even to some degree, Block One. Dan has a relationship, of course, and I think he's going to be able to make something happen there to give us an early opportunity. But the conversation has become more reasonable from some of the things I've heard. It's still a good amount, that will allow us to distribute a non-trivial amount of funds. Believe me, big things can happen. We're not talking like $10,000 worth here. It's still a relatively high number, but I'm glad it's not, something massive like 10 million EOS or even,
Yeah.
20 million EOS, or, some of these numbers were thrown out early on. And I mean, I don't think we
Not yet.
can do that yet.
Not yet. But it's a good goal, right? And like as we do this and the amount slowly, it'll allow us to prove out the system, see how it gets gamed if it does,
Mhm.
right? Like it's going to be attempted surely. So yeah, I'm with you on the gradual pace is better. And I also think it's interesting. I know when my previous job where I had a budget and it was a few $1 million budget, and some people when they have a budget and it's like a company's budget or someone else's budget, they don't necessarily. I think there's a certain mentality or certain disposition where
Sure.
you treat it like your own money or you don't.
Well, you
And
don't.
I'm very much I treat it like it's my own money. And even now, when we're voting, we're going through the Eden process. As a voter, am I voting from the perspective of this is my money? This whatever I'm. If I'm voting for you, you're going to take my money because I'm part of the community and it's community's money. Or do I think it doesn't really much matter? It's not my money. You're going to spend someone else's money. So my
Right.
my opinion. I don't know, but hopefully more people think of it as their money and
Take
therefore they will
ownership.
make, and then they'll pick projects, like you say, that aren't necessarily too fluffy and they're quite specific and deliberate about how they're going to spend the funds. Is there an
Mm-hmm.
ROI? How exactly are you going to spend the money? That to me is a lot more compelling just because I treat it like it's my money. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just a unique individual disposition thing.
Yeah, I learned that. I had a mentor early on in my previous life before jumping over to this space, and he said, when it comes to employees, some employees take ownership, some don't, but that's about them and who they are. It's not something you can like incentivize, really. It's not how much you pay the person. It's not whether or not they even have. Because I had someone who also had equity, an employee, but this individual always treated it like they were an employee. They always acted like an employee, not like an owner.
Hmm.
It was very frustrating to me, right? Because they were an owner. And of course, some people maybe at the more extreme end of this, say the somewhat, in my opinion, negative side of it, they'll act on which side is in their best interest at any given time, right? So the example would be if they get funded, they spend the money like it's not theirs. But then if they don't, they act as if they're an owner and should have, and should have more say and should have more clout. They put the hats on when they're convenient, right? When they want responsibility and accountability and influence, or when they don't.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. But I do think that's important. But whether or not we can get people to really see it in a way that they really value it, the accountability, imposed as a community is really what's going to be important, I think. And that's when, we had Brandon Fancher, right? He was our last guest, I believe. And, he really dove into what the Clarion team is building. And I mean, you're going to be able to see it right there. That to me is amazing. Like what I'm talking about is, after the first election, obviously not for the first election, but after the first election, when you come to the second election, once your group gets randomized, and you're going to be in the Eden member portal, you're going to be able to see, once those people come up in your group, everyone's track record, essentially. Have they been elected? What kind of transactions have they been involved with? Have they been paid for work or not? It's all going to be right there in front of you. So within seconds, you can be informed, right? And that's great. And I think popularity is not going to be what wins out. That will give you an edge in certain scenarios. In some, I think it'll hurt, just because some people just don't like it. They'll vote for other reasons against that. But it's going to be rep, right? It really is. It's going to be, what have you done? If you've been elected, what have you done? If not, what have you been doing as a community member? Are you getting results? Do you have a track record you can point to? Because, we really need those folks, especially when we're talking about really large amounts of money. That can go two ways. If you're not experienced, either you're afraid to spend it because it's just overwhelming, or you kind of blow it because you're all over the place, so but I know that, also speaking to the portal and the software development, that from a leadership perspective, and this isn't so much, I think, written in a bylaw, but it's being expressed in the software, there's already going to be that, you're not, I think originally, at least in my mind, I thought of it as, if you got elected, you were given a 10,000 EOS budget, that was going to be either somehow transferred to an account for you or part of some multi-sig, but it would all immediately be available if that's what you wanted to do with it. Not doing it that way. It's, what is it, 10%, I think, per month?
5%.
Is it 5?
5% of the entire treasury.
Of your allotment per month. I'm saying, I think it's 5 or 10, right?
That's not my understanding. But I mean, we can look at, I thought it was 5% of whatever the treasury was at the time.
Because if it's available per month, and then you, in proportion based on how you were elected, though, get X. Right, because you're not gonna get the same if you're level 1 or level 2 rep.
No.
That's 5% of the total is available. Yes, you think you're correct on that.
And then it gets split if it's 3 levels and it's a third per level, or Satoshi's one person.
Right.
The next level gets it split between them. Yeah.
Right. Each level gets the same amount of funding, but there's obviously progressively less people in each level.
Right. Exactly.
And that's good. Originally, Dan was thinking 50-50, effectively, meaning 50% of the budget would go to the triumvirate and 50% would go to the rest. But we talked more about really wanting to incentivize the layer 1, because that, or the first round winners, in that that's how you get the wisdom of the crowd. And you're really not going to get that if you're giving people such low amounts that it's not substantial to even fund something on its own. Because there was originally talk that that might be as low as, say, and I'm talking with like a multi-million-dollar budget election. Well, that might be 100 EOS, even 500 EOS. It's like, well, that'd be good. It would, people need to maybe come together to fund bigger things. But I'd rather see it at least around like what you got, Chris, for this past election, 1,000 to 2,000, because now, just in case, you really have something specific you want to do, you can get something done with, $4,000 to $10,000, right? Worth of funds.
Yep, fully agree. It's you can do a lot. Yeah, and it'll be interesting even in this next trial, where the next round there gets 10 EOS per person.
Right.
what are they going to do with it? Right? It'll be, it's
Mhm.
like a test. I don't know. Are they all going to kind of like get together afterwards and say, hey, everybody, why don't we all pitch our EOS in together and then do this more substantial thing?
Right.
Some might,
Right.
some, it'll be interesting to see. And I'm also like, I think it's going to be the idea of sortition for the Satoshi, to have the Satoshi randomly picked and know that your budget goes from, say, I mean, it goes up by, what's the math? Depends how many people are in
Right. Let's say
in the board.
thirds.
Yeah, but it could go up substantially. You could go up from
Mhm.
say 100 grand to 300 grand
Right.
if it was say a full $1 million prize. So like that's a big jump. And if you like, you need to, like, I think we talked about this before, where you need to have almost answers to all the questions. Like, what are you going to do if you only get the 100K? But then what are you
Right.
going to do if you get the 300K? And it's
Yeah.
like some people may not have an answer to that other part. Like, it's actually only
Mhm.
need 100K. Like, how many things am I supposed to prepare
Well,
for and represent here? Because
true.
I don't want to get stuck with this extra 200. I'm sure you can
Yeah.
find a home for it, but
Well,
it's not
remember,
necessarily what you planned.
we always have that option, right? And I think we might see that sometimes, even random or not, people go, no, 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 just pull me out. I don't want to be in the random. You'll have the right to do that. Remember,
I
for the
suppose, yeah.
Satoshi, you
Right.
could just say, listen, I don't have a plan for 300,000 or whatever it is.
Well, that's
I have a,
interesting. So you could pull
know,
yourself out of
yeah, of
that
course you could.
randomization. Ah, yeah,
It
okay,
would
that's
still
interesting.
get it done. I think what that's protecting is the individual run, and most likely on some sort of popularity slash potentially corrupt wave. You could kind of see how that might be possible
Yeah.
for certain people that may have a very broad kind of standing in the community and set of allies, if you will.
Hmm.
I think that's the idea behind that, is that individual won't necessarily be able to, have just a straight line to the Satoshi.
I think it'd be interesting is when you get to the board, and if you say there's 5 people there, and then you'll basically, okay, if I win, if I get randomly selected, I'm just going to take that amount and equally divide it amongst all 5 of us. And if the other 4 all agree to do that
Yeah,
as
I
well,
think
then
you're right. You can do
it's
that.
kind of,
I've
you
wondered
could,
that, but of
right?
course you could.
You could just say, it's moot who wins in terms of funding. We're all just, because we all have great projects. We all could use a little more to do what we're respectively doing.
Sure,
So how about
sure.
we just remove that? You still have, someone will have the title, of course, and whatever
Right.
comes with that. But then just make an agreement in advance. Say, hey, let's just
Hmm.
spread it around.
I also like the recordings because we all have very subjective memories, of course.
Yeah.
And it can be very easy, a couple weeks, a month after an election, to remember the promises differently. But we'll always be able to go back if there's ever a conflict and go, wait a minute, we're just going
Yeah.
to watch it. What did you say? What did you say you were
I need
going
to
to do?
rewatch. I need to rewatch my own now just before it, because the time's
Right.
not up between the next election, so I can still
Oh, yeah, you
complete
promised a lot.
all of
Yeah,
my
you got,
promises.
oh,
Yeah.
dude, you gave out so many comps, and
I did a little
corrupt as
bit.
they
I
come.
kind of did when I was trying to convince that Dan guy in the second round to vote for me. I was like, I realized I didn't realize I didn't need him to vote for me. I was thinking we needed all 4 at the time, but I was like trying extra hard to, okay, well, what if we work together on a marketing thing? And it wasn't. It was just I did try to follow up with him. I've reached out to him. We didn't. Nothing really went anywhere from it, but I did basically, But I realized I was I didn't need to promise anything else. I could
Right.
have just kind of, okay, this is fine where it is. I don't need to try to convince everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'll happen.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. There's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways. Don't just look at this. Maybe a strange analogy, but and I never watched this show when it first came out, but I got into Survivor, the
Oh yeah.
reality TV show, right?
Yeah, it's a lot like
And
that.
this is kind of like that in its own right, right? A completely different
Yeah.
context, of course, but that show always changes. They design it so that they put in shifts so that no matter what direction the show was heading with the politics of the tribes, if you know anything about it, it's just whoever's last, and you get voted on by your peers, so you can't just piss everybody off along the way. All of a sudden it shifts. The people who looked like they were in the driver's seat and had everything handled, boom, they split up the tribes. And now all the people you were in alliances with and made promises to are, somewhere else. And this isn't so much like that. The process is known, but I think the way in which people bring their creativity to the process is there's a lot of wiggle room. I think we're going to see lots of different ways, like you're saying, whether it's, you know what, I don't want this full budget, I want to split it, or, I want you involved, right? And that's why I really, it's not BS, and it's not some like recruiting, nonsense that, oh, everybody really matters. You do, you actually do. And just because you don't win doesn't mean you won't be involved. The opposite.
For sure.
Your vote matters so much that it's almost like people can't say no. I mean, that, it'd be difficult.
Here's one I was just thinking. So with sortition in the last round, randomly picking the Satoshi, are we going to have that last board do a discussion in advance? Like, they don't need to at that point. Like, I think it'd be cool though if we still had them get together, do a round without voting, but just maybe explaining to each other, first of all, whether they opt in or out of being in the randomization.
Yeah, well, I think you have to have that. Yeah,
but then also, like, let's ask each other questions. Okay, if you win, what are you going to do? Like, let's put it on record, right? Force some of this dialogue to get people to at least, because otherwise,
right.
And I still think there's a lot of value here in someone being creative with some video editing skills and cutting like certain parts of it and creating like a little montage, because the reality TV side, I did a joking tweet about it, but I don't know. I still think there might, like, a half joking, like, I think there might be some interest when there's a lot of money on the line and this gets more known.
And if you could take the highlights of the whole thing and put it into like an hour, right, of clips from different, it could be super cool,
super funny.
You don't need that skill set, obviously, but if you have it and you know how to edit, footage into a story, it's interesting. I mean, even if you just follow the person from their first round, and kind of go through and take the highlights of each round, that, the eventual winner. I think actually there's some terms that have come out though. DECA. That's what Dan mentioned. The winner is going to be called the DECA.
The winner is called the DECA?
Yeah.
Not Satoshi. Not Satoshi.
No. And I forget what he said for the
what does DECA stand for? What does that even mean?
DECA, like tetrahedron and all that stuff. It's based on the shapes and the sides of the, I think it's DECA is like
I'm gonna have to Google it. I think 10 is 10 in French, so it's probably some sort of root there, but it's spelled differently.
10. Decahedron.
Decahedron.
But it's something to do with the, the symbol. I'm spacing. Yeah. What's this called?
The chestahedron?
Chestahedron, right. It's got to do with that. And that's what they're talking about for the naming convention for representatives. Yeah, some creativity.
Yeah, hey, whatever. Yeah,
it'll come out. It's part of other discussions. So anyway, it's the early section. We usually chat for a bit and kind of give our perspective on some different things. I did want to quickly shout out the community in general and say, I just happened to look today and we're at 120 actual official confirmed members and 5 pending, which I think is pretty sweet because we hit the 100. It's like 30. We're talking about it on Monday, really, right?
Yeah.
So it was 3 or 4 days ago. We hadn't actually officially crossed it, right? We had enough people pending, but I think we were like 98 and 7 pending at the time or whatever. And now, we're up to almost 125. That's pretty good. So I appreciate everybody's effort just as a fellow Eden member. And with a little bit more of that, you can quickly see how we can get to a substantial group here. Any other thoughts? What are people thinking about? I guess general, we kind of didn't go specific, but just elections and,
John's hopping on here too now. So we'll be able to have our guest.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
Hey,
Mr.
how are you,
John?
So maybe just go take just 5 minutes. Is that a new microphone?
Yeah, I got a microphone stand. It's never been close enough to my mouth.
I have one of those too. They matter. They help, and they make you feel really cool, right? You feel really cool and official now.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I got to the final round of Eden. I'm a big deal.
Yeah,
big deal.
I got a mic
kind
stand.
of a big deal.
First funded individual, if you will, and it worked out great. If I do say so myself.
Got that Eden money now.
That Eden money crushed it.
Well, yeah,
So,
and you finished the Discord bots up and running, so you'll pretty much get your last payment soon. Still in beta. I gotta wait till I make sure it's working good before I pay you.
Okay.
hard bargains, Chris Barnes' character. He's a nobody. We're talking about this. Who's he?
Hey, I ran a budget. I run teams. I mean, I'm an ops guy.
Damn.
Yeah.
Hard ass.
I
thought this was just going to be, you get 1,000 EOS, I get 100 EOS, he gets 100 EOS. Maybe you pay John for some work, but I mean, spending his whole money here. I didn't know this shit was serious.
Everybody.
Come on.
Yeah. No, I don't know. What did you? Go ahead, John.
Chris has been a good like product manager. Like, he's got a bit of a vision. It keeps me on track, so I don't get too off on a tangent. So that's good.
Nice. All right. Well, hey, it's been great so far, and just super important. I think one of my concerns early on, when we knew that we were really kind of moving with this, was, man, in the early stages of this with some funding, we just have a bunch of flops, or we elect someone who turns out to be just an extremely talented scammer. I'm like, damn, we're screwed, But fortunately, it's been quality people like you guys, and and stuff actually getting done that's useful. People are over the moon about the power up. You want to just talk a little bit about that? That's like you said, Discord bot coming soon, but how do you feel that's gone so far?
It's gone well. It's like most things, it's taken a lot more of my time than I estimated, because someone out there thinks it's fun to try and abuse the free power-ups.
Of course.
So I'm learning a lot about blacklisting IP addresses and things like that.
Of course.
But overall, I mean, obviously, everyone likes it. I could tell that it was going to be necessary because I needed it. I use it almost daily.
Right.
People are like, oh, you're a power user, it's not really for you. I use it all the time. I need free power-ups because not every site out there supports the latest version of Anchor. There's always these weird edge cases, which I tell Aaron about every time I find one, about Aaron, Anchor didn't handle it at this point. And I still think Anchor needs like a fallback integration where we can't co-sign this transaction for you, but we're just going to give you a power up to fill the gap. So I think they need that kind of logic in the wallet.
Yeah, well, I'd say the way I gotta give Greymass some props. The portal and the way anchors were used to sign for the inductions, right?
Oh yeah,
their resource is in there. I forget the name of it. I don't want to fumble this. Fuel. The Greymass fuel is so convenient because I personally gotta say the power up thing to me is a disaster. Personally, I think it's just a bad way to handle resources, but I come from a completely different way of thinking of EOS.io chain resource models, because we did something totally different with Werbly, now UX. But you can't be expecting, don't add complexity, basically, right? Isn't everybody been busting their ass to make this easier? And having to buy certain amount of resources every time on your own and try to figure out how much you need, I just don't see that as being practical. So I'm glad you guys are solving this.
I mean, it's the story has always been oh well, the application or the wallet is supposed to handle the resources for the user, and which is technically that's possible, but the tooling to enable that has been lacking, and so you haven't seen that rolled out. So in order for the functionality to actually be utilized, it has to be dead simple for the developer, and that just hasn't been prioritized. So that's why you see these fragmented solutions. And I mean, I think it's very good. We should have a conversation about the rollout of power up, what worked and what didn't work, and that informs the rollout of new features in the future, like the stake-based voting pools that we've been talking about. And because like I totally agree, like if I had designed Power Up or like, you know, planned out how to roll it out, I would have done it much differently.
Right.
And or I would have, you know, communicated differently about it. But the problem is that there's always been this weird misunderstanding about responsibility between the EOS community and Block One. And like, what are they doing? What are we supposed to do?
Right.
And the fact that they came out with, you know, a nice polished like blog post and video about Power Up gave everyone the impression that they kind of got it. Like, we're going to handle it. We got this.
Yeah.
We're going to own this.
They've turned the corner.
Was like, cool. And then they did. And then, I mean, frankly, they did nothing
Right.
after that. So like, we just have to be honest. Like, we have to be very clear, like, who is responsible for reaching out to the exchanges?
Right.
Who's gonna, you know, is there documentation for, you know, for people to integrate this? I mean, you know, I have people coming to me who have absolutely no idea what this thing is. They can't find documentation about it. How do I, the inputs to the Power Up action, to the Power Up smart contract, they make no sense. You put in the fraction of the percentage of the network you want to rent. Who thinks that way? Who knows that?
No one.
I understand.
Who has any idea? Yeah.
I understand that maybe from a technical reason, that's how it has to be. But if that's true, then you should have, you know, very clear documentation. And I think
obfuscate that. And so can we add some layer of obfuscation? I mean, if as a dev, you don't need to think that way, like, then what the hell does that leave me? You know, how can I even come close? Like, you tell me that and I'm going like, what? Which part?
Well, just as an example, like Sayed, like for blocks, you know, he probably spent a day or two working on the Power Up page on blocks. And he just took the tools available to him. And thankfully, he didn't ask you to calculate the percentage of the network you want to rent. He asked you to calculate how much EOS you want to rent for CPU, which again is nonsensical. No one calculates anything, you know, by the EOS CPU. And also the way that that's calculated under the new system is totally different from the old system. But, you know, it's not his fault that it's confusing, right? It's because of the tools, and everything underneath it is confusing, and he's just working with what he has.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's something that obviously sounds like, you know, another way in which I think Eden, and especially those of you guys who are devs, right, we've been on the front lines of this thing for a while, trying to really, you know, code and build. You know, I hope we're going to see, you know, a decent amount of funding go that way, and I think we will, so that we can try to fill in the gaps, right? So much of this is about kind of sovereignty, in a sense, right? Just kind of getting past it. You know, I get it. Promises were made by B1. They weren't kept, you know, but here's reality. Here's what you wish it was. What you wish it was is a fantasy. This is where we are.
And also, that is very important. That what you just said is very important. And also the separation of the past and the present. So that's what happened before, what's happening today, and how do we interact, you know, going forward today. It doesn't necessarily doesn't have to be informed by, you know, what's happened in the past, right?
No, because you don't leave the opening for Block One to behave differently. If you just stay stuck on, you owe us, you should have done this, you should be doing that. It's like, why would you? That attitude is just it's a chronic resentment, which means that they're not going to get any mileage out of changing. All they're going to get is, damn right, finally. You know, who wants to, you know, that's not going to be in their interest, you know. And it's not people, because this happens with regular resentments in people's lives, right? A lot of people feel that if they let go of a resentment towards someone who really wronged them, they're letting them off the hook. No, you're not. You're not suddenly admitting innocence. You're not suddenly, you know, whitewashing the past to say that never happened. You're just saying it did. But what's the solution now?
Yeah.
You know, what can be done now to go forward better? Block One knows what happened. They were there. They were part of it. Whatever it is, what it is. Here we are now, though. What we're seeing so far from Block One, at least from my perspective with the Eaton side of things, is a lot of cooperation, a decent amount of support, and very high interest. Let's work with that. Let's work with that. I'm not going to get anywhere if I get into a discussion with anybody from Block One and all I do is bitch them out. Talk about what they haven't done and what they're not doing. That's just, ears are closed, right? So,
if you want to be solution oriented, don't hang out in the EOS Gov chat.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I want to bring some of those people in the fold. There's some brilliant people there, but at the same time, I keep thinking like, man, if I really had to read this every single day, I think I would just give up. It is so disheartening.
I mean, that sentiment that you just shared, I mean, I think, don't feel afraid to share that, in the Telegram groups or whatever, when you feel like things are getting out of hand. I mean, I think it helped. I mean, it's like, just like it's annoying to hear them complain all the time. Like, I'm just going to make it annoying for them to listen to me, tell them it's not an issue anymore, move on.
Equally annoying, equal and opposite force. Maybe something in physics I remember about that.
I guess I've just learned, like, culture is really important, right? And if we don't try to cultivate a healthy, positive culture, like we're just fighting an uphill battle, right?
Yeah, we're not going to go anywhere as a community, as a movement, as anything. Blockchain communities are these strange kind of new groupings and alignment of incentives that occur, whereby if you're a token holder, you're partially an investor, you're partially a decision maker, right? With or without governance, right? Because you can vote by selling your tokens. I mean, that's a vote in a sense. That's a yay or nay support activity. And it's just different. And it's also, this new era of trying to be transparent, right? Transparency's a bitch. It's a good thing on paper and it sounds awesome, but it's hard, right? I mean, we're not used to it. So unfortunately, my experience with transparency in a lot of situations, and especially, watching other people, is we're not used to seeing the ugly part of the process.
No one wants to see how the sausage is made.
You're right. Exactly. And instead of people viewing it in context as part of the greater process, right? Human beings tend to have a overreaction to negativity, right? We have this like negativity bias, and we don't realize that it's irrational, right? Because theoretically, you should say, "Oh, here's 10 actions, right? Here's 2 negative, here's 8 positive. Wow, good job," right? Doesn't often work that way. The 1 or 2 negatives can ruin everything else you've done. That's great in the court of public opinion. And that's often what happens when you've got a lot of transparency. It sucks because you do one thing and it doesn't look great, and suddenly everything's under investigation. Everything's suspect, and it's like, oh, come on, somebody just made a mistake. Like, it doesn't bring into question the entire project or organization's, whatever. Honestly, or level of trust.
It's some unhealed wounds too. I mean, that's what I think. I'm noticing definitely. Is people just keep dragging up this old shit because it hasn't really resolved itself. So if the EOS price was at $20, you wouldn't hear a peep from half of these complainers. Because right. But there's a few I think have an agenda, and that's different. And it becomes obvious, and just let them speak, and it becomes pretty clear who has an agenda, and then you just ignore them. But the people who are legitimately just upset about certain things, fair enough. And I get it. I mean, I invested in EOS from Genesis as well, like everybody here, and we're all kind of, hurting a little bit from that. But the game's not over yet, and we're playing a long game. And guys like John, you're building. You're obviously committed. You see a bigger future. Do you get, like, do you look at other blockchains much? Like, do you look at the tech and still kind of compare it to EOS? How's that line up?
I mean, I've been listening to like the major Ethereum podcasts, weekly for years. I've always followed other projects. I did a lot of research before I decided to build Boyd on EOS, because when I first started building Boyd, I didn't know what chain to put it on, right? So I'm always thinking about pros and cons. You know, like I like Cardano, I like Cosmos, I like Polkadot. The problem with all those projects is they're all just based on ideas, and they're not actually like built. Like you can't actually build something on most of those projects. It's just now, it's just now getting to the point where you can actually start to build things on those projects, which is crazy, right? And
how can you like something that don't exist?
yeah. And another thing that kind of bothers me is, like, I listen to these Ethereum podcasts, and in the DeFi space, they're very excited about these governance tokens. And I realized, like, for them, token-based voting is a totally brand new thing. Whereas we're just like, yeah, it's like, whatever. We've been doing it since day one. It's fine.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh my God, it's the future of blockchain. Next, we're going to go to proof of stake and stuff. And I'm just like, oh my God, like maybe we're just like way ahead maybe we're just like way ahead, like maybe, they're going to go to proof of stake, and then a few years later, they're going to go to some kind of a delegated proof of stake model. And we're going to be on like Eden and, whatever's after Eden,
Eden version
whatever.
185.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's always the stuff with like a lot of the stuff that Dan Larimer has come up with is like, it just feels ahead of its time, I'm afraid.
So do you think some of these other ones that you mentioned that you have done research in and you're aware of, do you think they may still, now that they're just, other than Cardano, which you can't still do a smart contract on, I don't think, but like some of the ones that you can start to now, do you think they'll start running into resource issues or anything like that EOS has seen? Like, are they because they're just getting into it, are they then going to start to experience issues? Or do you think maybe they've learned from watching EOS and some of the mistakes we've made?
A lot of it is like marketing and politics. Like they don't talk about it. Like the things like where we talk about the issues with Pareto distribution of token-based voting, like, for example, did you know that Polygon is delegated proof of stake? Like no one talks about it. They call it proof of stake, but you have delegators. Like it's the exact same model, same thing, but they don't call it that, right? So a lot of it is and you look at the you look at the nodes, and like a lot of them look like they're from the same company or like related groups or whatever. They're like these very small little shell companies or whatever that just run nodes, and you're just like, yeah, I don't know how actually decentralized it is. And then you look at ours and it's like, oh, these are a bunch of exchanges. I mean, people already trust their money with exchanges. These exchanges are trusted with like millions of dollars. They have they have a business model to lose if they were turned into a bad actor and things like that. So, right. I mean, and this is like, if there was things that I think Eden should focus on, the three things that have always come up in my mind is infrastructure, user onboarding / UX stuff, and marketing. And I put marketing in. Marketing is not just like posting things on Twitter. It's like making sure that people understand, like very technical documentation and just more information about how things actually work and how it's really like not, much different than many other proof of stake types of chains that people are already familiar with and things like that. And, for example, like the Cardano staking pools, they say it's more decentralized, but I guarantee you, if you look at on any given day, which staking pools actually made blocks on this day, you're not going to find a day where there's more than 21 separate entities that own the staking pools. Just because there's more nodes, doesn't mean that there's more major stakeholders that have control over building blocks, right? But people just like seeing, Polygon has 100 nodes,
right?
So people just like seeing bigger numbers. Like, oh, EOS only has 21. Wow,
21.
Yeah. So even though it doesn't really mean much, it really honestly doesn't. So and also like you have these like tech people. Well, I guess I answered your question, but yeah, I could go on.
Well, it's interesting to hear, right? I mean, that's interesting that you are paying attention to some of these other chains too, and yet you're so deep into EOS.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more, John, about infrastructure. What do you mean specifically?
Okay, so
I'm assuming technical software type stuff, tooling? Is that we're talking from a technical perspective, technical infrastructure?
I'm still kind of thinking on the visibility side of things, but yeah, there's huge issues on the technical. There's huge issues, like as a developer for EOS Power Up, probably about half of the code I had to write was just dealing with unreliable infrastructure. This is a huge problem.
Wow. Like what, again, I'm
annoying.
Just not trying to be annoying, but for us non-devs, like what pieces of infrastructure do you have to account for? Like, what are we talking about?
Like I will,
connecting with network resources and stuff and all of that, or what do you mean?
Like, the best case scenario, maybe you run your own node and then you don't have to worry about like rate limiting, right? But running your own node is kind of expensive for EOS. It requires a lot of bandwidth and it requires like some maintenance. It's not really just set it up and go. And so it's in any case, even if you're running your own node, it's good to have fallbacks. You don't want your application to fail just because one server went down, right? So I wrote, I have a list of, maybe I just go online and I find lists of nodes, and I have a list of maybe like 30 EOS nodes that are, most of them are run by block producers. And my script will, whenever I do a call or to try and get some data, it'll automatically pick one of those nodes and get some data. And when it wants to push a transaction, it actually pushes the transaction to like 5 nodes at the same time. And it just waits for one of them to reply back with a transaction ID. And then I count it as confirmed. But like I had to write all that, like all that logic, I had to write all that out. And if I didn't write all that out, then the service would be very unreliable, because you have issues where you push a transaction to a single node and the node tells you it's in a block, and then you check a minute later and it's gone, and it didn't make it.
Yeah, it should be very straightforward for you. I can see what you mean, where you just should have been able to write the code. It's going to get its information here, right? Or it's going to check here, or it's going to ping this, and it's just that's the source of truth, if you will. And
right.
But
it's also just like the underlying nodes are not that reliable to begin with.
Right.
So that's two things. Like the code should, the libraries like EOS.js and EOS.io from Graymass should have these kind of fallbacks built in, so it's easy for developers to implement. And the nodes need to be more reliable. And most EOS nodes are just not very reliable. Like you ping it once or twice and it's fine, but if you try to actually use it in production, you get all kinds of errors.
Yeah. So there you go, right? Is that a project, if you will? I'm trying to think in terms of like, I remember in the early Bitcoin days, there was, first of all, a lot of us, even if, as miners, we still ran full nodes typically on top of it. It was just kind of a thing you did, to try to be like a good citizen, if you will, of the community. But I'm talking GPU mining days. But I remember there just being a lot of talk of like, well, how's this going to scale? The file's going to be so big. And, there was just pruning and performance stuff that they kept trying to add to it so that, it would compile faster and better. Is that kind of like what you're talking about? You kind of need to maybe rework the node software and the way it kind of is implemented and functions, or does it just need new,
like there's a new feature in the latest version of Node.EOS called like a block stride, where you can tell it to automatically delete blocks older than, whatever time period or number of blocks ago, right? So that means like if you're just running a node, you just want an API node, you don't really need history, then you can enable this, and then you don't have to monitor your hard drive space. You don't have to worry about going in and restarting from a snapshot and deleting the old blocks manually. So little features like that, right? And you have issues with like peering. Like if you peer to too many nodes, then your node can get kind of confused, or like it gets bad data from some and it just makes it slow. But if you don't have enough peers, then you're trusting more and more, the very small number of peers you do have. So, I think that could be improved. I know a lot of people have issues with peering as well, like block producers and things.
Right. And we have this inconsistency too, as far as, so one of the things that I was talking about with somebody actually earlier today was the idea of potentially introducing standards, right? Something Eden might be able to do if we get that type of consensus, say from the community, that we possibly at least try to create guidelines, and make sure we're doing a good job communicating them and helping everybody be aware. But that's somewhat done with votes and all that. But I've never seen anything really that's like, okay, here's kind of the optimal block producer, for example, and here's kind of the optimal standby. Like these is from hardware, to software and services should be running. If you're trying to really, this is the chain, right? This is the performance. You want all this usage, you want all these new users. I don't think people realize that if we had 1 million new EOS accounts in the next week, we'd probably have a shit show on our hands. Are we really ready for that?
No, absolutely
we're not. Right. And I've heard that, and I don't think people understand that, because it's not so much that core technology can't do it. It's just that the software stack itself is not developed enough, the tooling, the resources, all this stuff you've been talking about. And all right, well, that's a big deal. We think the challenge is like, marketing or, PR or whatever, Block One's not spending enough money. It's like, well, there's some deeper layer stuff, what comes to mind as you're talking about this is I think of like in the US where we haven't done road work, there's just failing bridges and lots of potholes. And, you're saying you got to find that. Where did somebody just put down new pavement? I don't want to keep running over that damn pothole.
Where's those gray mass roads?
Yeah. Dominic's node sucks. It's a disaster over there. It's like a running mud.
I was asking Aaron to write a guide for how to run a node, because their nodes are so reliable, and I wanted to learn how they run them. So like if there was guides like that, and you could even automate it like with Docker, so it's just like hit a few buttons and you have your own highly reliable, redundant nodes running. I mean, that would be a great step in the right direction. And then a website where you could easily find the most reliable nodes, and maybe it's even a marketplace. So if you need a large amount of data, you could pay extra to get more resources from a node. We actually have a graph. We have a Grafana page where we track the reliability and performance of many EOS nodes, because we're trying to figure out which ones we should connect to, right?
Right.
So we do that, but it's more of an internal thing. But yeah, if it was a public thing, not only would that be extremely useful for developers, but when you have casual, like you go on YouTube and you see these like technical analysis gurus that they do like one blockchain per day or whatever, and they just do research on it, and then they make like a 10-minute video about it. Having a website like that where all the numbers, it's like, oh, this blockchain has over 1,000 nodes available. That's crazy. I'm going to mention that in my video, right? So having that information easily available, accessible, I think it's valuable for people outside the blockchain as well.
I have a link to share with you.
Okay.
It's basically kind of what you just described. I've been working on it over the past 2 weeks or so. It's a Dockerized API deployment kit.
Beautiful.
It's probably not ready for prime time, but we're using it on our jungle nodes right now, trying to figure it out and make sure it works well. But yeah, some of that stuff will hopefully be easier.
Cool.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it seems like the way things went, as we're well aware, resources and funding hasn't gone to the builders so much, right? It's gone to people who have put together better voting rewards, right? Which I'm not here to get into that discussion or debate per se, but it just this is another way that without just pissing and moaning, Eden can distribute resources to the right parts, of the realm, in a way that we don't have to, try to completely transform the way everything's done. You just fill those gaps. you know.
I wonder, like some of the things you're mentioning, John, and it's great having Aaron on here too. Like, how often do you guys ever like? Is there ever like a call or like is there dialogue between these power users like yourselves who are really deep into how EOS functions and well aware of these issues like nodes or resource management or all these sort of really foundational problems? Like, is there like, do you guys ever get together and like have a powwow, a brainstorm of like really smart dudes who actually can articulate the problems? And then, because if you did, that would be like a great first step to like solving them. Kind of get a lot of these, like, do BPs get together? Like, I'm totally unaware of how collaboration works from that type of level.
It's, I mean, the collaboration is mostly like, this is broken, do you know how to fix it, or like, you know, where do I find this thing? But yeah, it's not like a let's talk big picture, grand vision. I haven't had many of those talks. I agree, it would be useful to organize that.
That'd be a good Eden function, maybe, right?
Mhm.
Pull some of the members of Eden. Like Eden seems to be aggregating people who really care about EOS. I mean, we all agree that that's kind of a fundamental tenet of wanting to join Eden. So maybe within, as Eden grows and we pull in some more BPs who are more intimate with how it all works, get like a little bit of a working group, like kind of Eden can sponsor a bit of a, or at least organize some talks and get Kevin Rose in there and like start to have some more bigger, and because if you can organize people, at least it's the whole moving in the same direction. Right now, if everyone's just solving the same problem and they're all reinventing the wheel, that's super inefficient. Like we should try to like find a way to collaborate more effectively.
Yeah, well, I think you're hitting on something though, Chris, that's been like a positive side effect, if you will, of Eden. You know, the conversation is so much about governance and management of resources, but you know, it becomes a networking thing essentially by default, right? You know, people said that about the election, you know, that they felt like, you know, it was like a big networking event just built in. I mean, effortlessly, right? Not a, you know, I'm gonna shake your hand and give them the 30-second, you know, hi, I'm Dominic Thomas from, you know, just you got to know people and you felt like afterward, you know, there was a relationship there that you could capitalize on if you needed to, you know, or capitalize them. Sociopathic word almost, but you could enhance, you could continue to grow.
Yeah.
You know, you had a great starting point with people, and you're right. You know, I mean, we can all be shooting the breeze on Telegram and, you know, talking a little smack, and, you know, maybe 3 or 4 relevant people get in there at any given time. But we're talking about, you know, global community truly across every time zone. Having a group like this, it by default does things like, well, there's an Eden members channel, right? And so, you know, you can go there to find like-minded people. Hey, you know, John or anybody could say, you know, Aaron could say, let's start a, you know, Eden, you know, developers call. You know, let's start an Eden, you know, block producers call, like, you know, eventually, or both, or, you know, and that natural organizing, you know, it's just organizing in any way for any purpose does bring these other possibilities, which I think will prove to be very valuable in and of itself, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because you really needed Block 1 to be the catalyst for this. They were kind of the only ones who could do it, but then at the same time, I mean, I realized kind of why they didn't. And in many ways, we may not have liked it, but I think it's going to pay off ultimately, because it would have been almost impossible for them if had they taken an extremely hands-on approach. You would have had a nanny state. You know, I just think you would have the 600-pound gorilla. You know,
that's what you have in most other chains that I was talking about earlier. You have the benevolent dictator that has all the cash.
Yeah.
You know, and that's great so long as they're benevolent.
Well, the difference,
right?
The difference is that they have all the money and they do all the funding, and also often they like set up the initial nodes, and or they appointed the early like block producers on that chain, and or like for example Polkadot, they have like a council which is like has veto power over what the validators do. So they kind of have a way to strong arm the chain in a direction if they have to. And so I'm sure that hovers over people's minds as well. Whereas for us, there is a very clear, it's like they hold tokens. That's about it. Like they
Right.
have voting, they can vote for
Right.
validators or whatever, just like anyone else, right? So that's
Mhm.
interesting difference for us with our relationship with Block One.
And I think if we can allow them, make the space for them to, instead of being dad, you know, the leader, the president, the benevolent dictator, let them be an engaged member of the community, you know, an engaged member that has a large skin, you know, a lot of skin in the game, right? Who, right, shares the interest, but I think they're going to be able to function more effectively that way. And that's what I'm starting to see emerge, right? Not we're going to handle it, we're going to organize it all, we're going to fund it all. More like, well, we do have funds. You're right. We're going to put some here. We're seeing something happening with Eden. Great. We're going to put some here. Put some here. It's in our interest. We do have 100 million tokens, but not all up to them, not entirely initiated by them. And that's what I think everybody was waiting for, which is so odd, right? In crypto land, where it's all like, you know, anarcho-capitalists who, you know, don't want anybody to have any power anywhere ever for more than a split second, and it's decentralized, you know, which sometimes can be its own disaster. Nothing gets done, but it's amazing. It was like this call for dad to come in and, you know, handle everything. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm glad that didn't happen. I don't think we would have liked it, frankly. I really don't.
Yeah, no, I this is kind of like, oh, you want a decentralization? Well, you got it.
You
right?
got it.
So,
Yep.
you know, careful what you wish for. I mean, but I still would like to see Kevin Rose and like the PBE group, you know, why aren't they in talks like this, like, so that we could collaborate and communicate. There is this weird wall where it feels like they can't always say what they need to say or whatever. Like, for example, I think Zach Gall was trying to get Kevin Rose on EOS, on Everything EOS podcast for a long time, and they just never got permission, you know, from Daddy Bloomer to come on here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't understand, you know, what's going on there. Like what all the
there's
issues.
definitely some of that, and that has to change. I'm 100% with you, John. There seems to be, from what I've heard, obviously I've never worked for Block One, but there's an internal culture of silence when it comes to this chain, this community. It's like, just don't say anything, don't do anything, don't represent anything. You know, I think Kevin actually has probably really, I'm imagining, flirted with that line a little bit just with his interactions, you know, and the conversations around, you know, block producer votes and, you know, that whole thing we had last week. Yeah, that has to change. But again, I think they've been backed into a corner, and what happens? You get defensive, right? It's been lose-lose for them to this point, really. It's like, unless they just, you know, change the world and just became Christ, nothing was going to be good enough. And what do you do?
They kind of, I mean, it's not just lose. It's they dropped the ball a few times, and like they've overpromised and underdelivered. Like there's some, you know, there's some statements that were made of things they do that haven't done. The EOS VC did not get, it was, you know, that didn't work out. So I mean, as much as I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and have them an opportunity to rectify wrongs, they haven't helped themselves with some of the things that they did do.
No, they haven't. And I'm not giving them an excuse. I'm just saying this is what happens. This is predictable, is my point. And so again, do we want to sit around with we wish it was different? I mean, do we need Brendan to come out and get a public spanking? Like, what is it that you need? You know, like, let's just acknowledge it. I mean, let's call a spade
5 lashes
for sure. You know, like we are right now. Like, Block One, you need to change this culture. We're not the enemy. You know, we're people too, man.
Well, it's not over,
and that's feelings.
That's like, even though those marketing like you've never seen before. Well, that, you know,
okay,
they haven't lost all their money yet. They still could unleash marketing like we've never seen before. So I mean, depends how your time horizon and how patient you are.
Well, and I will, in this instance, defend Brendan a little bit, probably to my detriment. I'll be, well, thank you guys. It's been great. I know I'll be gone after this. It sucks being the front person in this really like this new world of access. 10 years ago, even Brendan's a CEO of a company that raises $4 billion. He doesn't talk to you ever. He doesn't tweet, he doesn't have any interaction with the plebes, if you will. He's just in a boardroom. He's got executives that work for him, and he has public statements carefully crafted by people that are paid a lot of money to make him sound great all the time. So it's hard. Again, I'm not excusing the lack of action, but I am saying that also you get excited and people want information now. And I fell into this, I never lied or said anything that I didn't think was going to happen, but shit falls through. And then people don't want to hear that, they just don't want to hear that. I mean, who knows? I'm just saying he makes that comment about marketing, and then who knows, by the time Voice launched, the board said, no, not putting a big marketing budget on this, want to do a soft launch. Sorry. If this thing catches on, then we think you should put funds behind it. I don't know. That probably didn't happen. But my point is, it does happen though. And then you just look like an asshole because you can't come out and say that. It doesn't work. You can't throw your board under the bus, for example, in that instance, come up publicly and go, yeah, I know I said we're going to do a lot of marketing, but boards are real douchebags. They wouldn't let me do it. You can't do that. So it's hard. I don't know.
Less is more, which is why I think we're seeing less and hearing less, because then they've learned their lesson on over-promising and under-delivering.
Sure.
Right. Or unlike Eden, where we need to make sure we, promise and deliver. It's a whole new process. I think that this is, maybe big companies should consider an Eden process for their selecting of leadership. It's no longer, it should be more of a meritocracy than just by decree.
Wow. Something to be said for that, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Are you working on any? So, John, do you want to show anything? You got any projects, anything on the go you want to talk about that? Because we'll post this later on, and people who aren't listening live might still be able to hear what you got going on.
We haven't seen many users for the Discord bot. I don't know. I've noticed their Discord has not been very active. Like the official EOS Discord is not very active. EOS DAC. I haven't been using Discord that much either. So I guess just the EOS community has mostly migrated to Telegram. I mean, it's good that we have the bot up and running there for when they come back, but yeah.
Okay. I've never even used, is it like Telegram? I've never used Discord, in fact.
Oh, it's different.
No.
It's more like IRC maybe, where you have channels and groups, but
yeah, maybe Slack. It's closer to Slack.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever used that.
Minimally, but okay.
It's just different.
I'm working on some stuff with Telos right now. To some IBC contracts between Telos and EOS, so you could send tokens back and forth. That's it.
Nice. That'll be useful.
Well, I think that too, eventually, we haven't talked about it much, and it's obviously a little premature until we prove this out on mainnet, but I'm really excited about what I hope is the eventuality of Eden, groups on each of the EOS.io chains, or let's say hopefully most of them, if not all, and then being able to kind of elect, we've talked about some sort of ambassadorship system likely emerging, because that could also be a really great way to have a kind of a larger governing group to help set maybe macro type agendas that are around subjects that are in everybody's interests, right? For example, the infrastructure you spoke of, John, everybody benefits from that if it improves. Some of the chains do some work on their own, but if we were coordinating those efforts and energies, everybody would have a better performing network. But I could see it being appealing, because what would normally happen in that scenario, let's say each EOS.io chain sends a representative to some sort of, board we're going to form, a United Nations, if you will. Whoever comes from mainnet typically just leads it. right? Because that's where the most money is. That's where but in Eden, it wouldn't work like that, right? If there needed to be any elected leadership of that group, they would do political playoffs. So the person from Telos, or from Boss or wherever, Wax, who knows? I mean, any of those people. So it's not automatically going to the agenda is not going to be set by basically the person with the deepest pockets, like it normally would be. So I think that's exciting, and I think that opens possibility for greater levels of collaboration than people probably even think are possible. Because that's something I wanted to see long ago. As like, I stuck my hand up as like the first sister chain and took a beating, of course, because everybody at that time was like, "What are you talking about? It's mainnet, ride or die." What are you doing? And really, that was a side effect of B1's decision making, right? It's like, well, they're making open source software that's really awesome that any of us can use. And I'm sorry, but I'm totally open, totally decentralized chain. I can't do what I want to do, so I'm gonna have to do it differently over here. But the early conversations were that we'd be more of a bit of a kind of federation. Of course, it was chains upon chains upon chains. Dan talked a lot about a lot of interoperability and stuff, which, again, I think is part of some of the frustration you ran into is I don't think those things were given much priority, if any, in certain instances. But, I envisioned, each of the networks kind of having its purpose, right? All hovering around mainnet in a sense, right? Mainnet being the open public grounds, and then we'd have a combination of public, private, and hybrids and everything between, because Werbly was designed to be the underlying financial compliance layer. Because the way we built it, it was just once you were, KYC'd, we had an OAuth, and you never had to show your stuff again, and it would have worked with any chain. Like you wouldn't have had to have a Werbly. I'm sorry, you needed a Werbly account, but you could have used it with your EOS mainnet account for an EOS mainnet app, is the point. Anybody could have used it. We could have been the compliance layer for everyone. We could have done transaction monitoring, for example, for everyone. Would have been fine. All we would have needed was oracles on each chain.
You're talking about some kind of a lack of technical infrastructure to pass the data between chains.
No, but yes. I mean, ultimately, I think that would have further incentivized people to do this. But I'm just talking about a vision of collaboration, which I don't think, we ended up with tribalism even within EOS.io, right? The way I see it. I mean, it's clear, right? There's definitely like kind of rivalry and animosity, some chains more than others, but it's not a, hey, we're all in this together by any stretch, And I think that's a shame because there's strength in numbers.
I mean, it really is, because that's what you see with the Cosmos ecosystem, because they actually have delivered on their Cosmos IBC that they've been working on for like 4 years. And I've been using it on Osmosis, which is basically like a very simple DeFi box. It's its own chain, and you can move tokens from lots of different Cosmos chains there and trade them. And it's like, oh, this is cool. And people in the Cosmos community, there was some time for a few years where they were like, how do we drive how all these chains, like the Binance chain is using Cosmos, and crypto.com chain is using Cosmos. How do we drive value back to the Atom token? And they're like, once we get IBC, that'll drive value. So that was kind of, but there was a lot of questioning in that community if that was really going to work out. And it's looking like it's going to work out for them. Right. And there was promises, or there was a lot of conversation about having some kind of a official system level IBC functionality in EOS.io in the early days. And that just never panned out. That wasn't prioritized. And I really regret that never happened, because that was one of the reasons that I wanted to build on EOS, because I believe that's a good scaling solution of having lots of chains running in parallel.
We were the same. You know,
But
I eventually envisioned like side chains too. That technology, I thought, you know, our thing was designed where there was going to be side chains for. First of all, we ended up building our own software for various types of accounts, like because you know we needed more than KYC for DeFi. You need accredited investors. You know, you have different categories of users with different permissions and all that when it comes to the compliance framework. But then I also wanted nations because the laws are different in every country. So we expected we'd have like, you know, a US side chain, a England side chain, you know, an Ireland side chain where those users could be grouped. And, you know, but again, it was all still designed to drive value to mainnet because they were never going to be quite as powerful without the other. You know, we knew most of the accounts would always be, you know, on the main chain, for example. You know, all we were trying to do was say, listen, just come over here, do your KYC. Now that's set. Go back to your mainnet account. And then whenever a mainnet app wants to use the OAuth, all they have to do is connect to the API. They don't need anything over on the Warbly side, for example. That's how it was designed, you know. But it was built for other EOS, you know, it's designed for other EOS IO, you know, apps to use, right? We didn't design it to connect with Ethereum apps, for example, as well, right?
This can still happen though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This hasn't happened, but this, like, in reality, still could become something that is like becomes materialized. We just need.
But that's why I think
there's
this
some sort of direction to
exactly
happen, right?
But a collaborative governance eventually is really the fertile ground for this, right?
It has to be like that. Has to be ironically has to be done in a centralized way. You have to have one. You have to have one solution that connects all the EOSIO chains. Having all these desperate third-party solutions, it's like fine, but you can't trust it. You can't integrate it. Yeah, it's bad. So
there's no standard.
Yeah,
everybody's, you know, the way we're going now, everybody's going to have a different IBC protocol, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the Cosmos team, their IBC protocol, you can actually build plugins for other chains. So they're actually building a plugin for the Polkadot chains, and Polkadot actually modified some of their core code to work with the Cosmos IBC. So that's something that we could talk about is like, you know, should we work, you know, on building a plugin for EOSIO? Because it just never happened here.
Exactly. You know, and that would be a great thing that Eden could directly fund. You know, again,
absolutely.
We want to expand. Look, I don't know why anybody ever thought like one programmable blockchain was going to win out. I really have no clue. I don't know why anybody still even says that about Ethereum, just because it's the kind of the clear leader. It's not going to happen, guys. That's insanity. You know, John, as a programmer, that would be so insanely limiting. You know, if there was only ever going to be one blockchain database network, basically, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It'd be like having one computer language to program in, you know, one type of computer database, you know, language to work with. That you can't be everything to all people, you know. It was always going to get interconnected, brought together eventually. Standards will be set, and that's another major area where I feel under the current circumstances, EOSIO will be left behind. Because that doesn't seem to be on Block One's agenda at all. I don't see a lot of outreach. You know, like you're saying, right? Polkadot and the Cosmos, obviously that's their leadership getting together and coordinating that.
Yeah.
You know, I actually did that with BitShares on my own. You know, I had their lead project dev who was funded by their worker proposal system for a while, talking with some other people from this community that had some interest in building out an IBC. And it was huge for us because had we been able to pull that off, BitShares is already the ultimate DeFi technology. It truly is. It's all right there. Derivatives, exotic instruments. You know, one of my main advisors, who was an ex-hedge fund manager and all this stuff, was blown away when I showed him BitShares. He was like, "You kidding me? It's been around for 8 years. Where have you been all my life?" You know, if I'd known this existed, Dom, he said this to me at one point, if I'd known this existed, Dom, I never would have messed around with you. I'd just gone over there and built the stuff I want to build, you know. But Again, it's just, we're falling behind on that, obviously.
Yeah, I wanted to talking about Eden. Like, yeah, I think Eden should be used to fund and coordinate, the production of those kinds of things. So like I've done everything I can to get people into Eden. I think I maxed out my invites before we hit 100. I just invited someone else today. And I've been sending emails to like the Boyd community and stuff like that. But I really feel like the homepage needs to be updated, needs to have more updated information. I need like a centralized place where I can send people information. And we need more outreach in terms of like getting people involved. I really think that if people participate in the trial run, they'll be totally sold on the concept.
That's right.
So like I really want to get people that are on the fence or people that don't care about Eden involved in that. And
please do
because like the feedback from everyone that was involved in the first round was like so positive, right? So like for example, I had an idea of an NFT, like a pin, like I voted, right? And everyone that went to the trial run is going to get one of these NFTs. And maybe there'll be like some Finny token airdrops or something like that, right? For those users to get people excited, and also just to show that you were there, right, in the early days, right? So, is there some promotions or what kind of incentives can we do to get people excited to get involved?
Great question, but you're right. If we get people, I'm also thinking a lot of time, like there's a couple in STAM, like people I'm going to invite, but I just don't know them. So I'm like, you know what, I'll make you a deal. Come to the trial election on the 17th and then like participate there. Just do the first round if you don't want to move forward. But at least then I'll be able to see a video of you for 50 minutes interacting a bit. And then I'll be comfortable to at least, invite you.
Yeah, that was something actually that we mentioned that we might talk about a little bit. And maybe we can bring this to the open mic on Monday. But, I did have a conversation with Dan, I think it was yesterday or the day before. And I was asking about, what are really the expectations? What have you been thinking? Because there's conversation about, at what point might there be disciplinary action, for example, if you don't attend elections? And when I was first thinking about it, in my mind, I was kind of like, well, that's the only thing we're really asking you to do. To me, it's like you miss 2 in a row, you get the boot. But then Dan brought up some great points about like, whoa, why? Why? If they come and get inducted into Eden and pay their dues and choose not to participate in elections, that is a vote. They're voting for the rest of the community to handle and run the elections.
Yep.
That's okay. That's still great support. We don't want to exclude those people. And in the other call that we did on Monday, remember, Chris, there was conversation about if they don't want to be on camera. Right. And now that gets a little bit trickier, but I think if you start looking at it, though, that there's going to just be restrictions then, like one of the things that came up was you can't run, but you could still participate in voting, maybe. But you'd have to be on camera just for that. But, these people that didn't want to be on camera for, I don't know, or stuff like that. Or maybe not. Maybe you can't. Again, all you can be is a contributor. We don't want to exclude those people. They were basically saying like, take my money, like now can they just make a donation? Sure. But they want maybe some recognition still that they're supporter. And it could just be a very restricted account. We should be open-minded about it.
Sure. Or just first round voting. Like put a little more pressure on people inviting the person, right? So instead of just being one inviter and 2 witnesses, maybe just jump that up. You need a couple inviters, like a couple of people who are going to stick their neck out for someone else that
there you go. Right.
who isn't willing to go on camera, but we absolutely know this is a real person.
Yep.
And there's not going to be many of those. There's only going to be a few, but at least it does open it up.
It's an edge case, but let's be creative. Let's not deny anyone the opportunity to support us within reason, right? But yeah, that was just that opened my eyes as Dan was mentioning that, and I started looking at it from that perspective, like, oh, right.
What if the induction like someone doesn't want to be on camera, or like they appear on camera but like wearing a mask or something, or like hidden, but like instead of just answering questions, the script, like following the standard script, they actually have to tell you a little bit about themselves. That kind of creates like a thumbnail of their voice and the way they talk, right?
Sure,
which would be very difficult to fake.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, and even Sybil, like, it's still a person. If the elections are occurring simultaneously, one person can't be multiple people in an election. So even then, and in terms of sock puppets, it's like, okay, fine, but it's still all simultaneous. So you're gonna have all these people without a face say the exact same thing. I mean, what's the point? Where's and if you can only get in the first round, if you're not able to get past the first round, then that limits the exposure to, downside. So yeah, I think it's good that people are bringing this up, and no one's just closing the door. It's nice to hear that there's some flexibility in what we thought was a steadfast rule, that at least, well, maybe not. Maybe we can find a way to still include more people.
No, but I like that idea, Chris. I think that makes sense, of just that there has to maybe be additional inviters. Like, it's not just an inviter and 2 witnesses. You're getting a few people to vouch for people that are going to remain a little more anonymous, because frankly, it's a bigger risk, right? What are we talking about? We're talking about risk management. That's all this is. It's a risk analysis. Take it that way, rather than make it, I guess, somewhat either personal or emotional or ideological, right? Like, those things kill large groups like this. When you're getting involved in a global community of any kind, it doesn't go well if you cling to your ego, essentially. Like, you need to be willing to let go of some of this stuff to make it work, because there's just too many cultures coming together. There's too many ideas, and you don't want to squash that. You don't want to create too much conformity, because then you lose the power, right? You lose the resilience of it. So taking the sort of open-minded approach, right, versus a hard line, I think, is critical for all of us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, maintaining standards, right? That there's a boundary, right? Because otherwise, it just turns back into the random everybody join shit show that we all know doesn't really work.
No thanks.
So
yeah, and I don't know. I feel like we've got enough. I'm hoping that who's in Eden so far, if we had an election and most people showed up that are some quality people in there that can build, like guys like John, Aaron, right? There's some guys who can really do a lot with some funding. We don't need many more people to really have an election with some substantial funding and have
and to
great
have an
things
impact.
come out of it.
Right.
We just need to be able to convince the funders of sorts. So either BPs through inflation or some sort of block one donation. We need to convince them that the system works and it's trusted. But I think we're almost there. Like, I know one of the people I'm looking to maybe invite is from Start EOS, is from that BP. So they're really keen. They wanna participate, and so it's nice that the Chinese communities, really, but they haven't had a chance to yet. Here we are talking in English, and we're having another English trial election. So I think we need to be a little more aggressive about opening up to the Eastern community, which is a large percentage of token holders, right? So if we want,
definitely.
Yeah.
But I think there's also that element of patience in just remembering that once we get the blueprint right, replicating is going to be easy, right? It's like franchising. The first location's a pain in the ass, but if you get it right and you get the ops down, making the second or the 200th are kind of the same difficulty. So I think we'll be able to proliferate Eden rapidly once we get its first kind of solid MVP down, so but it's hard. I know they're knocking on the door, right? And I'm very much an opportunist, Chris, and I sit here going, well, let's get them engaged now, but we have only so many resources to do that. And I'd rather be a little bit more patient, because the other side of it is, well, we don't want them to have a terrible experience. That maybe, for example, there's just, there's not enough people to, stay engaged with them and provide support, for example. Like that's what I noticed with, the Spanish community got really excited, and following the first trial election, they immediately wanted to run a trial election. It was like, I was just starting to get my bearings and figure out like what the hell just happened in the first one, and to take a look at it and get all of your feedback, right. And write that up and try to digest it and then get it back out to Dan. And I mean, before I could even do any of that, they were already running one. And I think we found out it was like, it's too soon. So they're chilling, and but instead, I think focusing on things though, like translations, right? That we can do, right? And that we can put an emphasis on, so that you're right. They at least, we want everybody to be able to at least at a very minimum follow along, right? And not have to play, months and months of catch up potentially.
Was that like a coordination issue? They weren't able to get enough people involved to run a trial, or?
A combination. They're having some strange issues with a little bit of resistance. Some people are a little bit leery of Eden in that community. Some from what I've heard, some influential people. But no, it's just more logistics. I mean, they wanted support. I mean, I know the election looks kind of easy, but it isn't if you haven't done it. And I put in a lot of practice to pull ours off. But it's going to be super easy though once the portal's built, and the features that the Clarion team's working on. It's not going to be anywhere near like what I did for the first one to coordinate and organize, and what we'll be doing for this one. So that was it, John. And just, we don't have, like you're saying, in some ways Eden is following this path. Like, we don't have a ton of documentation yet, like clear documentation about all the processes and procedures. It's a little scattered. And of course, in their case, has it also then been translated, right? Like, so their people can, read and inform themselves. So it's just, we just don't have the resources yet, the support for it. And it doesn't make any sense to do it right now. We don't have any funding either to offer, to share yet. We will. And we got some good stuff. On that note, quickly, John, if you could hang out briefly once we stop the call here, I just have a quick question for you. I need some potential help with something, or you to point me in the right direction for some smart contract work.
Sure.
Well, yeah. Do we? We've been going.
That does it.
We've been going for a while here, anyway.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for coming on, John. Appreciate your insight, expertise, what you're doing for the communities. Fantastic.
Yes.
The first mock election, even though I won it, you were the winner in the end. I mean, it was if I hadn't been,
you were the real winner.
It's true. Like, had I not been
representing
your project, I wouldn't have won. So, my deepest gratitude to you for what you do, and the fact that you engaged, you put that post up the day before, like, you're reachable. I was able to reach out to you as a nobody, and you responded, and so I think you deserve a ton of credit, and you're not done. You're still building stuff. So,
yep.
And you're a young guy, so who knows?
No, we got lots for you to do.
Yeah, I mean, you guys got to. I'm hoping that I can get funded.
You're gonna get funded
because no, I mean, I don't assume anything.
No, you shouldn't.
Especially in the
you're gonna
blockchain
get funded.
space.
No, you're right.
Because I mean, I have people, like, I have a friend, his Polkadot, or he's building on Substrate, which is it's just the EOS.io of Polkadot, basically. And I mean, they raise so much money, and they're trying to hire me. You know what I mean? This happens all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would rather work on EOS.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, it's what you'll hear about Ethereum all the time. People just saying, "Listen, this is where the money is." In EOS land, it's squeezing water out of a rock. Trust me, I did it for 2 years. It was sucked. Fundraising's terrible anyway. To me, as an experience, it's not pleasant. I'm not one of those people that can, I don't know. I think some people can see it as like a game, like hunting or something, and they can really get into it. For me, it was just brutal. Felt like I was bleeding out on the table at every meeting, just trying to say, like, do you care at all? Like, I'm actually trying to do something good here. They're like, what's the ROI? You know, what's the calculated ROI at 1, 3, and 5 years? Okay, kid. Yeah, beat it. So yeah, you know, I hear you, man.
Stick around. At least, I mean, there's another election coming up. Who knows? Maybe you want to put another post up something else you want to build?
Give us to the end of the year. I think things are happening faster too. There's been some recently really good developments. So,
and I think even just when Block One finally does do something, even if it's just kind of good, surely that will help, you know, pump EOS a bit, and then that can bring. I mean, because it's all unfortunately centered around hype. There's irrational exuberance in price discovery right now, as proven by Dogecoin. So, like, we just need a bit of hype and a bit of positive momentum and turn some sentiment around, and just enough token price increase to shut up the B1 chronic haters, and then the money and projects will start to look at EOS again and be like, oh wow, okay, this is a good project. It's not a shit coin. It actually, there is fundamentals here, and what you've noticed, John, in terms of tech and why you still choose to build on EOS. It's not like you're unintelligent in making that decision. So, you know, other people will potentially come to the same decision if they actually do the proper due diligence and don't just listen to the hype machines out there who shit on EOS because of how the ICO went.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage everyone in this call to think about how they can bring more people into Eden, and more importantly, I think, bring people into this next trial run. We really need to get as many people involved in this next trial run as possible. So post in the main Telegram chat if anyone's got NFTs or some kind of incentive scheme that they want to do. Now's the time to do it and announce it and promote it, and let's go. Right.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. We're going to close this one up and stop the recording. And just quick shout out Saturday. Chris, are we good for the
yes
webinar this week?
We will do another webinar of sorts. They just ended up being kind of more hangouts, which I kind of prefer. We just get shooting the breeze. It's not
so
really,
maybe they're Saturday hangouts. This was all experimental, folks. It was just Chris and I brainstorming, just trying to get some stuff going. So, you know, it's all evolving. I think this format though we like. And it's worked well. I don't think the open mics on Monday, but you know, Saturday's evolving. It's a hangout. You know, grab a beer, grab a wine, grab a juice. You know, grab a snuggly blanket, and I guess come and hang out on Saturday nights.
Thank you, Mel.
What time is that again?
It was 8 p.m. Eastern, so whatever.
Was
4
that
p.m.
1?
UTC.
UTC
that?
is
oh no, the other way
2.
around. Yeah, it'd be 8 p.m. would be midnight UTC, I guess. But I think I did 9 p.m. I mean, late. It's selfishly later for me, so I can have a beer and finish my day outside.
It is what it is.
Landscaping. No. So,
you folks in European want to run your own shows?
We
please.
do.
No one's stopping you. We didn't have to license this.
Yeah, we need to do an earlier one though. So maybe I'll see about doing like a 9 a.m. sometime, so we can get some other side of the world people in.
We don't need to do everything.
And some of these. Oh, the other thing I should mention, we are going to have so right now Mark Shear's been putting these up on his YouTube channel, but I know Brandon Lovejoy is thinking about doing another sort of unofficial Eden where we can get some of these we're just doing this, right? We're not sanctioned by Eden per se. So this is sort of less official. So I think we're going to start a YouTube channel that's just around these to get these unofficial stuff up there. So for now though, Mark Shear, I'm sure he'll get these up.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Right on.